All right, hello, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We present information about the latest and greatest theories of everything. In particular, things that you can use in your life to help you make sense of things. And we try to go pretty deep on these things, present them in great detail. And today is our 323rd video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory. And the reciprocal system of theory was originated by Dewey B. Larson. And that was back in the 20th century. He died back in 1990. Left behind a lot of books and articles on his reciprocal system, and a few followers who have contributed to the cause as well, although it is a very small amount of followers, and this is a very, very obscure theory. The basic idea is that we live in a universe made entirely of motion. And for Larson, motion was the relationship between space and time. So that sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time, hence the reciprocal system of theory. You can think of motion as a fraction, with time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator. Time or space do not have any independent existence. They only exist together in motion. And motion is broadly defined. He's in particular referring to a kind of motion that you call scalar motion. It's a motion that has a magnitude but has no specific direction. That you can envision using a balloon with dots on it. You blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other. And that is not in any specific direction, or really in all directions. And, you know, in the previous scientific paradigms, such as the Greeks believed that we lived in a universe made out of matter, and the Einsteinians felt like, okay, well, it looks like the universe is made out of matter, but what's underlying that matter is basically energy, E equals mc squared, and so ultimately it's a universe made out of energy. Larson is really saying that matter and energy are just two separate varieties of motion, along with all of the other really scientific quantities or units that we're accustomed to seeing, such as speed, acceleration, force, you know, all the electrical capacitance, voltage, resistance, magnetic flux, electric current, electric charge, temperature, pressure. These are all fractions with time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator, with the caveats that space and time can come in 3 dimensions, possibly even 4. But it's what Larson calls coordinate time and coordinate space. Space and time both have 3 dimensions, or aspects of them have 3 dimensions. And then there is also what Larson calls clock time and clock space. And this is really a progression, a scalar motion with a magnitude but no direction, no specific direction. And you can see that with the clock time. the time is always getting later and later and later and later. But it's not getting later in any specific direction. And so Larson refers to that as clock time. And then there's clock space. Remember that they're the same. Time and space are the same, other than they are reciprocals of each other. So they have the same qualities to them. So you have coordinate time, coordinate space, and then you have clock time and clock space. Clock space is that space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart, like two dots on an expanding balloon, or like all the dots on the expanding balloon. They're all getting farther and farther away from each other. The more you blow up the balloon, the farther they're moving away from each other. The farther apart they are, the faster they're moving away from each other. And this was actually observed by the Hubble telescope back in the 1920s, I believe, where they said that all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. That should have given them a clue that this kind of scalar motion is important, but it really didn't. They didn't really distinguish, like, this scalar motion is it's different than just your vectorial motion. Your vectorial motion has always got a direction. It's an arrow, and they didn't do much to distinguish scalar motion from that kind of vectorial motion. But they should have. And if they would have, they probably would have come up with something like the reciprocal system before Larson did. The other aspect of Larson's theory, his first postulate, his first and major postulate, is also that space and time are quantized. There is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. If you don't have a full unit of space, then you do not have space. And if you don't have a full unit of time, you do not have time. Those units are very small, but they are, microscopic or instantaneous, nearly instantaneous. And you got to have a whole unit before you have anything. If you have 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, then you have the speed of light. So the speed of light in Larson's system is what he calls unit speed. 1 over 1 equals 1. And unit speed, the speed of light, is the background or the origin, the 0 point, the reference point, the ether of this universe of motion. If you have a universe of motion, you have motion is the first thing that you have. And motion is really the default position. So whereas the legacy scientists think about, they make their measurements from 0, if they're going to measure speed, they measure it from 0. In Larson's system, you measure your speed from 1, from unit speed. Is it greater or less than unit speed, and by how much? And so with so unit speed is 1. Greater than unit speed, since time and space are quantized, you can't be 1.3 times unit speed. It's got to be an integer. So you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. But if you're less than unit speed, then you go from 1 to 1/2 to 1/3 to 1/4 to 1/5. So when you're balancing out, they're balanced if they multiply to 1. Whereas in the legacy system, you're measuring from 0, plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. They're balanced when they add to 0. So the legacy science system is an additive system. They add to 0 the balance. But the reciprocal system is a multiplicative system. They multiply to 1. And that fits in with the quantization of space and time. And that half in Larson's system, half the universe is actually moving faster than the speed of light, which Larson calls the cosmic sector. And then half the universe is moving slower than the speed of light, the material sector, which is the only sector that the legacy scientists concern themselves with. Einstein himself said that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe, thus basically excluding the entire cosmic sector. Okay, now today we are looking at an article that Larson wrote. Don't know when, but we just got done with an article called The Physical Nature of Space. This article is called The Nature of Time. And we're going to get it started right now. Quote, "To attempt a definite statement as to the meaning of so fundamental and underlying a notion as that of time is a task from which even philosophy may shrink," says Richard Tolman in his classic treatise on relativity. But the, quote, "notion of time is basic in every field of science. In legal documents, we often see the expression, 'time is the essence of this contract.' It is no less the essence of physical theory. Without the symbol T and all that it stands for, there would be little left in physical science. In order to make a definite and meaningful statement about any physical phenomenon, it is therefore necessary to define the concept to which the name time is to be attached. This definition may not actually be expressed. Indeed, it is seldom expressed except in such basic works as Tolman's. But in any work that lays claim to scientific accuracy, the exact meaning of this concept must be specified, implicitly if not explicitly. Those who use the concept without defining it are not evading this requirement. They are simply accepting a definition set up by someone who has preceded them. How then does science meet this serious challenge at the very base of its theoretical structure? The absolute necessity of a precise and unequivocal definition of an entity that is so difficult to grasp that the mere thought of trying to understand it appalls the scientist. Tolman tells us, frankly, how he and his colleagues have met this issue. Quote, "We shall assume, without examination, the unidirectional, one-valued, one-dimensional character of the time continuum." So that is how they evaluate time. We shall assume without examination the unidirectional, one-valued, one-dimensional character of the time continuum. Physical science justifiably prides itself on the rigor of its treatment of the subject matter which it covers. Precise definitions, clear-cut distinctions, careful and critical development of theory in exact logical and mathematical processes. But when we examine the foundations of this work, we find that the entire structure of carefully developed theory rests upon nothing more substantial than 3 items which are assumed without examination. Scientific precision here has here taken the form of precise formulation of pure assumptions, the most unreliable of all instruments of thought. Unfortunately, precision is no substitute for validity. An assumption is no less uncertain and speculative because it is expressed in definite and exact language. As matters now stand, we have not grasped the essence. We see it only through a thick veil of uncertainty. And without the solid foundation which only a clear understanding of the true properties of time can give us, all of our vaunted logical and mathematical precision is spurious. Indeed, if the premises are false, the more precise the logical development, the more certain we are to arrive at the wrong conclusion. The physicist who fills pages of the Physical Review with complex mathematical calculations may be giving us a development that in itself is faultless. But if any of the properties of time that have been assumed without examination are not valid, then he is introducing some kind of an error every time he uses the symbol T. And in spite of its impeccable outward appearance, the work as a whole may be completely wrong. If physical science had been uniformly successful in building up a consistent, integrated structure of theory, fully capable of meeting all demands upon it, this serious defect in the underpinnings of the structure could well be viewed with equanimity, on the ground that the assumptions are justified by the results thereof. It is admitted on all sides, however, that in spite of the spectacular successes that have been achieved in many areas, physical science is still far from having a comprehensive and satisfactory basic theory. In fact, so many scientists have given up in despair and no longer consider the construction of such a theory to be within the range of possibility. C.N. Yang, for instance, was quoted in a recent news item as, quote, expressing some doubts about the ability of the human brain in general and his in particular to accomplish this task. And Henry Margenau admits that, quote, to the outsider, the conclusions reached by a modern physicist seem almost like a declaration of the bankruptcy of science. In the light of this situation, it would seem that science has now reached the point where it can no longer avoid facing the issue as to just what the properties of time actually are. Of course, we have no positive knowledge that errors in the assumptions regarding these properties are responsible for or have contributed to the failure to construct a satisfactory basic theory. But where the best efforts of the most competent investigators over a long period of years have failed to produce the expected results, it is certainly much more likely that the fault lies in basic premises that have been assumed arbitrarily and without examination. Then, in any lack of ability of the human brain to apply logical and mathematical processes to these premises, a thorough and painstaking examination of the validity of the assumptions that have been made concerning the properties of time is therefore very much in order. The question then arises as to how this issue can be approached. The scientific profession has hitherto believed that there is no alternative to the use of pure assumptions of the kind listed by Tolman, but the investigations which I have carried out and have disclosed that it is possible to apply a much more reliable process to this problem, and thereby to arrive at some different conclusions as to the properties of space and time, which eliminate most, if not all, of the basic difficulties that physical science now faces. This new approach substitutes a process of extrapolation for the arbitrary assumptions heretofore utilized. It is true that extrapolation is also, in a sense, a process of assumption, but the extrapolation assumption, the assumption that the situation or relation existing in the known region also exists in the unknown region, is inherently vastly superior to any other assumption that can be made, with a far greater probability of being a true representation of the physical facts. And in any case where extrapolation is possible, it is obviously sound policy to give the consequences of such an extrapolation a complete and thorough examination before anything else is even considered. Okay, we're going to stop it short right there and take over tomorrow with the next installment on this article. I think it might take about 4 days to get through this. But in general, he's just saying that science, prides itself on being rigorous and exact and precise and, perspicacious in general. But they assume without examination the qualities of time. So Larson is going to step back and hopefully make a thorough analysis of what time actually is. And then we can go from there. Okay, thanks for tuning in today. Have a great night.